Hey everybody, it's Alex at Motoroso.com. In this video, we're going to give you a quick how-to installation guide for a cold air intake on the 2.3 liter 6th generation Bronco. Now, what we're installing is the aFe Momentum GT. We made a separate product spotlight video about that. Put a link to that right over here, and those, of course, are available for purchase on Motoroso.com in 3 different configurations with 3 different filter types. This is the ProGuard 7. We'll put links to all 3 of those in the description of this video. Now, before we get on with our installation, and it is pretty straightforward, you are going to need a special tool that you probably don't already have. It's called an angled disconnect tool, and it's a set of 6 for 15 bucks on Amazon or something like that. I think Harbor Freight sells a set too. You're going to need this orange one, the first one down from the largest, to disconnect one of the pipes. And if you don't use this, you probably will break that pipe and potentially other things. You don't want to do that. So make sure you get the right tools before you do your installation. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we can install the aFe Momentum GT, of course, we first need to remove the OE airbox and tubing. Start by removing the pop clip holding in the scoop duct. Now, we also removed the 4 bolts holding the intake cover in place, but in hindsight, this step can be skipped. Pull up to remove the scoop duct and airbox cover if you choose to remove it. Next, disconnect the IAT sensor connector from the OE system. Release the retaining clip holding the wiring harness to the OE airbox. Release the upper harness retaining clip. Disconnect the quick release vent connector. With a 7mm socket, loosen and disconnect the factory intake tube from the airbox. With a 10mm socket, remove the screw holding in the OE airbox. Pull up to detach the airbox from the isolators. If isolators are pulled out with the airbox, remove them and insert them back into the mounting bracket. Using pliers, loosen the clamp and disconnect the bypass valve hose. Disconnect both the quick release connectors from the fuel vapor hoses. Next, we need to disconnect the crankcase vent tube connector by using this green angled disconnect tool. Except thanks to Ford's amazing engineering department, you cannot place the angled disconnect tool fully around the tube as the backside of the tube is obstructed. So in order to remove the connector, you would have to break it. So our approach to this, instead of breaking the connector and the hose and having to go buy a new hose, we simply used a hacksaw blade to cut off the flange just before the connector. It's plastic and the cut went pretty quickly. Now with our newfound unrestricted access to the entire circumference of the tube, we can still use the green angled disconnect tool to disconnect the connector. Now we had to hook into the flange with a poker tool and pull very firmly to release it, but once it's released, that tube will be just fine to use again. Using a 10mm socket, remove the screw holding the CAC inlet pipe in place. With a 7mm socket, loosen the lower CAC inlet pipe clamp and disconnect. Next, using a 7mm socket, loosen the upper CAC inlet pipe clamp and disconnect. Disconnect the bypass valve electrical connector and the 2 harness retaining clips. Now we can remove the CAC inlet pipe. In order to access the clamp at the turbo, we first disconnected the turbo exhaust valve controller and removed the 3 bolts holding in place. Rotate this out of the way to access the clamp and loosen it. Then remove the factory intake tube. Reassemble the turbo exhaust valve controller and reconnect the connector. With the teardown complete, we can start assembling the aFe intake. Start by preparing the supplied coupling, mount and loosely tighten the supplied clamps, and then installing the coupling onto the turbo, loosely snug the clamp. We can now place our aFe airbox into the engine bay, aligning the housing pins to the isolators and press it down until it's snugly fit. Next, we need to install the supplied rubber isolator at the airbox mounting location. Using a 10mm socket, install the supplied screw to secure the airbox. Reinstall the scoop duct retaining clip. Over on a clean surface, we need to assemble the intake tube, start installing the supplied aluminum vent fittings, tighten using a wrench but do not over tighten. Some threads will still be exposed. Next, we need to install the supplied plastic fitting into the grommet, making sure the inside bead of the grommet is fully seated in between the fitting. Install the grommet assembly into the intake tube. We used a bit of grease to guarantee an airtight seal. Next, install the supplied IAT sensor grommet into the intake tube. On the OE airbox, remove the IAT sensor by rotating it counterclockwise a quarter turn. Install the IAT sensor into the grommet by pressing down and rotating clockwise until it locks into place. Place the aFe intake tube and install first onto the turbo coupling and next onto the air filter itself. Now you can reconnect the IAT sensor, the quick release vent connector, the quick release fuel vapor hose connectors, and the crankcase vent tube connectors. Reinstall the CAC inlet pipe, align and reconnect the upper tube. With a 10mm socket, retighten the inlet pipe clamp. Reconnect the lower CAC inlet pipe tube and retighten with a 7mm socket. Reinstall the CAC inlet pipe screw. Next, reconnect the bypass valve hose and with a set of pliers, reinstall the clamp. Reconnect the bypass valve connector and corresponding retaining clips. Lastly, make sure all the clamps are tightened and connectors are secure, and with that, you're done with the install. All right, hope you found this video helpful. This product is available for sale at Motoroso.com. We'll put links to that in the description, and we'll put a link right here for the one with the ProGuard 7 filter, and that is available at Motoroso.com, where you can reach us on live chat or call us toll-free at 833-MOTOROSO. If you'd like to learn more about the filter specifically, check out the product spotlight video right over here, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.